Welcome to Literature Buddy online class. I'm Ridwan Adedeji and I will be your teacher for today's class. So in today's class, we are going to analyze Newton by Elizabeth Kamara. So I will be the one walking you through the summary, themes, and poetic devices in the poem. So this particular lesson is sectioned into four phases. The first phase is a poem reading where we will be reading the poem. The second phase is the summary of the poem where we would delve into what the poem is all about, the inspiration behind the writing of the poem, and then of course the background of the poem. Then the third phase would be the themes in the poem. And it is in this section that we will be discussing the themes in Elizabeth Kamara's Newton. And then the final section is the poetic devices in the poem. And it is in this final section that we would take a critical look into the figures of speech, figures of sounds, and other poetic devices used in this poem. So let's get right into it. We are starting with a poem reading. Before we start reading the poem, there is something I want us to take into cognizance, and it is the fact that this poem is divided into six stanzas with a total of 46 lines. So let's start with the first stanza. They speak in a new tongue and dance new dances, minds battered into new modes and shape. Their eyes revel in the wonder of the new, embraced and bound to art with impregnable chains. The old songs as disregarded dreams, remnants of a past, ties of family and friendship loosened, broken, burnt, the ashes strewn into the bottomless sea as fishes swim by, careless of the lost, mindful of where they the new generation, careless of bonds, of family, of tradition, of heritage. They care not, nor revere the old. Their minds turn inwards, only inwards, like the insides of clothes that marry the bodies of mankind. No room for elders, not even the edge of their minds. Their ears blocked to the old tongue and ways of doing things, glorying in their new newness of a borrowed tongue and culture, every man for himself, by himself, of himself, a strange coldness descending like snow covered mountain, or like bathing at the back of the house on a rainy July day. The gust of wind, falling trees, catching roofs away, tugging skirts, and swirling debris in the air. Their borrowed shoes dance. Their borrowed minds parted the Red Sea long ago. They hang the last lock on their culture and glide into the future without a backward glance. That is the end of the poem Newton by Elizabeth Kamara. So before reading the poem, we established two facts. Structurally, the poem has six stanzas and 46 lines. So that is the structural composition of the poem we are engaging with in this video. So now we'll move on to the summary of the poem. But before we move on to the summary of the poem, well, we need to understand that the poet is an African poet. She's a Sierra Leonean educator and writer. So the subject, the subject of the poem will most likely revolve the African experience. So when we look into the poem and find that the African situation is engaged in the poem, we shouldn't be surprised because of where the poem is coming from. Having said that, the poem pictures a generation that has abandoned its culture. It pictures a generation that has refused to listen to its elders, a generation that has lost touch with its ancestral roots and ancestral values, a generation that has superimposed foreign values, foreign culture over African values and African culture, a generation that does not want anything to do with the African culture, a generation like Lakunle, a generation like the set of Africans portrayed in Birago Diop's Vanity. So this is the generation being portrayed in Elizabeth Kamara's poem. So this is just to tell you that this poem, the reference to these two texts, The Lion and the Jewel and Vanity, it is just to tell you that this poem is not written in isolation. It is part of a long list of texts that have been written about cultural abandonment, cultural loss, clash between cultures, the assimilation of foreign culture at the expense of African culture. So that's just to tell you that this poem wasn't written in isolation. It is part of a body of work that addresses similar issues. So now to the summary of the poem. So fine, this poem. This poem talks about a generation. It talks about a generation that dance new dances and speak new tongue. And we get to know that new tongue, new dances, we are not meant to interpret them literally because in the broader context, they represent new ways, new culture, foreign cultures. So this is basically what we have on ground. And given African history of colonialism, Africa is a continent that has been colonized, that was colonized rather, sorry, that was colonized. And up till today, decades after colonialism, we still have traces of colonialism all around us, vestiges of colonialism all around us. We speak their language, we behave like them. You talk about mannerisms. We want to be like them, so we can pass for them. So we only have a black skin. We can pass for them, and that actually makes me reminds me of a particular passage, or a particular passage from The Lion and the Jewel that sounds something like that. That sounds like that. So they speak new tongue, they speak new dances, and they also believe in. They also have a new modes, new minds and shape, and they have embraced the new culture. They have embraced the borrowed culture. They see their own culture as a remnant of the past. They see their own culture as disregarded dreams, as old songs. So you can see the kind of words the poet's choice of words convey the distaste for the disdain for African culture and the preference for European, or let's on a broader scale, foreign culture. So, and part of the things this generation has lost, this generation has discarded, is family ties. They discarded family ties. They've broken ties of friendship. They've discarded the communal spirit, the sense of a collectivism that unites every African. So it is no longer there. Uh, the uh, they've supplanted the spirit of collectivism with individualism, and that we can find in stanza 4 of the poem, where we have every man for himself, by himself, of himself. So that's, and talking about other things they do not, they no longer cherish. We have family, tradition, heritage, let's just say ancestral values, generally ancestral values. And to make matters worse, this generation has turned deaf ears to the words of admonishment from the older generation. Hmm? From the older generation, they have turned deaf ears to the words of the other generation. They do not want to listen to them. They do not want to hear from them. They do not want to share from their ocean of experience and wisdom. So their ears are blocked to the old tongue. And this particular line, that's line 28 of the poem, echoes something. We echo something similar in Vanity by Birago Diop, where we have they have turned their ears to a plaintive voice or something like that. So that is basically what we have in this context too. So they refuse to listen to the elders. They just want to they just want to copy the ways of copy the foreign ways and discard the African ways. So they bask in joy. They bask in joy of their newness. And that's the trend of foreign culture, of foreign ways of doing things. They trend in that. They bask in the joy of that. And the basking of a thing is what distinguishes this poem Newton from Vanity by Birago Diop, because Vanity by Birago Diop, while it is also more of a lament, it also it also speaks of the frustration of this new generation that has lost touch with its ancestral roots and values. But in the context, in this particular poem, the difference is, in this particular poem, the new generation, they get fulfillment. They get fulfillment in this new and foreign ways. So they get fulfillment from the new culture, from the borrowed culture. So their borrowed shoes dance, their borrowed minds parted the Red Sea along. So they've hung the last lock on their culture. So they are now people without roots. They are now people without roots. They've decided to just embrace the foreign culture, assimilate foreign culture at the detriment of their own culture. So you may have come across analysis bordering around new tongue is about language assimilation, language acquisition, etc., foreign language acquisition, etc., etc. Well, that would be a narrow interpretation of the poem, because tongue in the context of this poem, tongue, shape, modes, it's actually speaking directly to the African mindset of seeing foreign countries, of seeing foreign ways, or let's just sum it as European ways, as the standard. The standard. So that if you don't meet up with that standard, then you are not civilized, or you are not worth mingling with or something like that. So it's talking about the abandonment of African culture and values in preference or in embrace of foreign culture. While we understand that the foreign culture here is not specifically specified, but we can say when we look at influences across foreign influences across Africa, we may look at the Arabian influences. I mean the Arabian influence and European influence. So we can put it that way. So we don't have to necessarily narrow it down to European influence alone. So that's what even it transcends the language narrative. It transcends the language narrative. We have mannerisms to talk about too. We have mannerisms. We have culture to talk about. We even have things like things we do not really put into consideration, like naming system. Naming system. A lot of tribes do no longer give their children, a lot of parents do no longer give their children indigenous names. They give them Arabic, biblical names. You can name it. So names. So that's what we have in this poem. So in summation, this poem is about a generation, a new generation that has discarded old ways, old African ways, and lost touch with its ancestral values in embrace of foreign ways. So in the poem, we have several indications of foreign ways. The foreign ways are portrayed as in good light, while the African values are portrayed in bad light. Let me give you examples. We have new tongue, new dances. We have new generation. So we have glowing in their newness. But when it comes to African culture, you have things like last love on their culture. You have things like old songs, disregarded dreams. So these are the qualifications for the African culture. And you can see there is there is an obvious difference between the portrayal of each from the mindset and from the point of view of this new generation. So this is what the poem is all about. It's talking about a new generation that has discarded old African ways and lost touch with its ancestral values in embrace of foreign ways. So we are done with the poem reading. We are done with the summary of the poem. So the next thing would be the themes of the poem. So the next phase of this lesson is the themes in the poem. So the themes in New Tongue by Elizabeth Kamara. So what are the themes in the poem? We all understand what a theme is. We know that themes are ideas in a text, central ideas in a text. So and we have abundance of them in Elizabeth Kamara's poem. So some of the themes, one of the dominant theme in the poem is cultural abandonment or cultural neglect. So this is one of the dominant, if not the dominant theme in the poem. It is one of the dominant themes in the poem. Well, cultural abandonment. The idea is very clear. The idea is very clear. It's very obvious that the new generation has abandoned the African way of life. They have abandoned the African culture. They have abandoned the African culture. They see African culture as old songs. They see the ancestral values as old songs eh, that quantifies or equates as disregarded dreams. So they have put a lock. They have put a lock to their African identity and African background, everything that defines the African background. They are not interested in flying the colors of their African values. So they superimpose. That's to complement cultural abandonment. So they superimpose foreign ways over their ancestral ways. So that's basically what we have for cultural abandonment. Cultural abandonment. They see their culture as a remnant of a past that they do not want to identify with. It is for this reason that people speak English or speak foreign languages where they could have used their indigenous language, or where they could have used their indigenous languages. So that's basically for cultural abandonment. And it isn't even surprising that when you get to some homes to you see a child of 2 years of age, 1 year of age, 1 year old, a 1 year old kid speaking English, the 3 year old kid speaking English fluently. But when you ask them to speak their mother tongue, then you would see then they won't be able to do that, to do the basic. So that's the situation the poet is trying to capture in this poem. Okay, so another major theme is cultural shift. So the poem started with this theme without giving us any warning, without giving us any warning that this is what we should expect in the poem. She just went straight into it. She talks about a generation that speaks in a new tongue, that dance new dances. Then she goes on to contrast it with the culture they are running away from. So we see that cultural shift. We see that cultural shift almost immediately. So they shift from the African or ancestral ways of life to uh, the foreign ways, to the borrowed culture, to the borrowed shoes, the borrowed that has given them, that has molded their minds into borrowed minds. So they shifted into, they shifted almost immediately to another culture. So we witness a shift from African ancestral values to foreign cultures. So that's a for cultural shift. So the next theme in the poem, the next theme in the poem is individualism versus collectivism. So most African societies are known for their communalism, their sense of a community. So, and this is what the poet is trying to do by juxtaposing the foreign cultures, individualism against collectivism, juxtaposing individualism with collectivism. So she pits individualism against collectivism in the poem. So, and individualism is embodied by the new generation and the culture they have assimilated, the new culture they have assimilated. And we have several instances of that there. For example, we have the not wanting to even give space for elders to talk. We have that to justify the position of individualism in the poem. And even in lines 31 to 34, we have a stark portrayal of individualism there, where we have every man for himself, by himself, of himself. So that's basically uh, individualism, and that's what the foreign culture has brought with it. And additional baggages the foreign culture has brought with it. Then their minds turn inwards, only inwards, like the insides of clothes that marry the bodies of mankind. So mind turning inward instead of outward for people with more experience, for people with more experience and wisdom, to admonish one, or to cancel one, and things like that. You can see if there is a stark difference. What we have here is individualism. In fact, I may say some lines of this poem disprove the saying that no man is an island of himself. Some lines here disprove that. So just to project the individualism of the foreign culture and the lack of communal accountability. Then versus collectivism, we all know that the collectivism is embodied by the older generation, and it's basically talks about how everyone in the community are communally accountable to each other. So if a mother gives birth to a child today, the child is not duty bound to her alone. The community has the responsibility of raising such child, and that's what we have with individualism versus collectivism. The poet pits individualism against collectivism in the poem. So another important theme in the poem is generational conflict. Generational conflict. So generational conflict is another important theme in the poem, and we can see the dichotomy between the older generation and the new generation. We can see that dichotomy between them. So they literally do not see eye to eye. They do not see eye to eye. The young generation, that's the new generation, does not even want uh, to associate or identify with the older generation. And we have several instances of that in the poem. No room for elders. Then the following line, that's line C 26, there is an emphatic no. So not even the edge of their minds, their ears blocked to the old tongues and ways of doing things. So, and it is also demonstrated by the fact that this new generation is careless of bonds, of family, of tradition, of heritage. So the ties of family, they break ties of families just to be on their own, just to be their own self, and things like that. So there is a generational conflict in the poem. So the dichotomy between the old generation and the new generation, the old ways of doing things and the new ways of, or let's say the borrowed ways of doing things. So we have generational conflict. Well, we may address cultural laws too, but explaining cultural laws, we've explained cultural laws under cultural abandonment and cultural neglect. So I don't think we need to over stress. I mean, we don't need to. I don't think we need to explain that. That's basically what these are the themes in Elizabeth Kamara's poem. So we are done with the themes in the poem. So now we are moving on to the poetic devices. We'll be moving on to the poetic devices in the poem.